Hey friends, tonight let's talk about a time when there were no mobile phones, no internet, not even electric lights. We'll explore the little-known bedtime habits of a woman who stood at the pinnacle of power, Catherine the Great, and the small worries she might have harbored in the dead of night. It sounds quite intriguing, doesn't it? After all, even an empress who commanded a vast empire had to face the setting sun and rising moon, and had her own nocturnal hours. If you had lived in that era, you'd probably be racking your brain every night, not just about what to eat tomorrow, but also how to sort out all of the day's affairs by candlelight. That truly would have been a skilled endeavor. If you enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss our future Bedtime History episodes. Feel free to tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. If you can, dim the lights a little more, find a comfortable position, and let the day's clamor slowly fade away. Alright, dim the lights a bit more, let's slowly embark on tonight's historical journey together. In the 18th century Russian court, as night fell, the daytime grandeur and commotion would recede, revealing a unique tranquility. The hustle and bustle of the day, the ministers' audiences, the comings and goings of maids and guards, and various elaborate ceremonies, would gradually dissipate with the setting sun. In their place, there would be the flickering glow of candlelight, the subtle crackling of burning logs in the fireplace, and occasionally, the faint footsteps of patrolling guards from afar. For Catherine the Great, night did not mean complete relaxation. Instead, it often marked the most private, and perhaps the busiest, second phase of her day. Her days were always long and full, beginning with morning prayers, followed by handling mountains of state affairs, receiving all sorts of people, presiding over meetings, reviewing documents, and even finding time to learn new knowledge and read various books. By evening, when most people began to enjoy dinner and socialize, Catherine might attend a court ball or watch an opera. Yet, even these seemingly leisurely activities were often occasions for her to engage in political maneuvering and observe human nature. So, when night truly descended and she returned to her private chambers, the physical exhaustion and mental tension might have only just begun to surface. Catherine the Great's bedchamber was not merely a place for sleep as we might imagine. It was more like a private office, a sanctuary for thought. The room typically featured a spacious desk, piled high with parchment, quill pens, and inkwells. Nearby, there might be a globe, a few atlases, and rare books she had collected from various places. These objects silently spoke of her thirst for knowledge, her desire to explore the world, and her deep contemplation of the empire's future. Before retiring, Catherine the Great had a series of fixed habits. These were not due to any superstition, but rather to help her organize her thoughts and ensure the smooth operation of the court. First, she would ensure that all important documents for the day had been reviewed, or at least assigned to the relevant ministers for processing. She disliked leaving unfinished work until the next day. This was a sense of responsibility and a pursuit of efficiency. Sometimes, even if it was very late, if an urgent report arrived, she would immediately get up to handle it, rather than waiting until morning. Next, she would perform some simple ablutions. In that era, bathing was not as convenient as it is now, but cleanliness and grooming were still highly valued by the aristocracy. Catherine might use scented soap and warm water to wipe her body, allowing the day's fatigue to dissipate with the steam. Her ladies-in-waiting would carefully comb her hair, its golden strands shimmering in the candlelight, as if carrying the glory of the empire. This process, for her, was perhaps a rare moment of relaxation, where she could temporarily set aside her empress identity and return to the calm of an ordinary woman. Then, she would put on a comfortable nightgown. This nightgown might not be as ornate as her daytime court gowns, which were adorned with jewels and embroidery, but its fabric would certainly be soft and comfortable, allowing her to feel completely relaxed during rest. She would sit by the fireplace or lie in bed, letting her ladies-in-waiting read to her. These books varied widely. They could be historical works, philosophical treatises, or the latest literary pieces. Her thirst for knowledge was endless, and even before sleep, she wished to absorb new insights and keep her mind active. However, among Catherine the Great's bedtime habits, the most peculiar, and perhaps the one that best reflected her qualities as a ruler, was her obsession with information. She would ask her secretary or personal guard to report on some small matters that had occurred inside and outside the palace that day. These seemingly minor details might include private conversations between ministers, idle gossip among maids and guards, or even interesting anecdotes about folk customs. She deeply understood that these seemingly insignificant pieces of information often revealed the undercurrents of the court, and allowed her to better understand public sentiment. She would listen carefully to these reports, occasionally asking a question or offering a brief comment. Her memory was astonishing, allowing her to piece together these fragmented bits of information into a complete picture. She was like a shrewd detective, searching for clues in these minute details to better control the overall situation. This habit also allowed her to have a comprehensive understanding of everything that had happened that day before going to sleep, thus avoiding being caught off guard by sudden news the next morning. Of course, as an empress, her security was paramount. Outside her bedchamber, multiple guards would take turns on duty, ensuring her safety from any threat. Strict patrol systems were also in place throughout the palace. Even so, Catherine the Great was not entirely without worries. She deeply knew that with greater power came greater responsibility, and with it, endless conspiracies and challenges. Sometimes, she would be alone before bed, deep in thought by candlelight. She might contemplate the future of the empire, how to respond to external threats, or how to balance internal power struggles. Those heavy responsibilities, those unresolved issues, were like invisible boulders weighing on her heart. Even an empress could not completely escape these troubles. She might silently ponder how to handle a certain minister's request the next day, or how to deal with a diplomatic challenge. Historians often mention that Catherine the Great did not sleep for long, and she was always accustomed to waking early. This might be because she had too many things to deal with, too many responsibilities to bear. For her, time was precious, and every minute and second could not be wasted. So, even before sleep, she could not fully relax. Her thoughts were always running at high speed. However, beyond these habits, Catherine the Great was not entirely devoid of emotion. She too had her joys and sorrows, her moments of vulnerability. In those long nights, when she faced the candlelight alone, she might also recall her distant homeland, her departed loved ones, and the years that had passed. These memories might bring her a sense of comfort, or perhaps a touch of sadness. The court at night was always full of various stories. The secrets hidden in the candlelight, the unknown habits, all constituted another side of history. Catherine the Great's bedtime was not just simple rest. It was more like a stage where her thoughts, her worries, and her deep love for the empire were played out. In her own way, every night she made the final preparations for the day's imperial operations and sought a moment of tranquility for her soul. As night deepened and Catherine the Great's long and fulfilling day drew to a close, as the palace's clamor gradually faded, and her ladies-in-waiting completed their final attendance, she would often choose to sit at her desk, light a few candles, and begin one of her most important bedtime habits, writing. This was not merely about reviewing official documents. It was more a private, profound form of expression. Her quill, rustling in the night, recorded those secret thoughts that were inconvenient to voice during the day, or those that required repeated contemplation. Catherine's writing covered a wide range of topics, from private letters to European monarchs, to greetings to close friends, and even her own philosophical reflections, historical commentaries, and drafts of plays and memoirs. She seemed to view writing as a way to organize her thoughts and release pressure. In an era without psychological counselors, pen and paper were perhaps her best listeners. Her letters to Enlightenment thinkers like Voltaire and Diderot were a significant part of her bedtime writing. These letters were often lengthy, filled with her unique insights on philosophy, politics, and art. In these correspondences, she shed her imperial majesty, presenting herself as a scholar who loved knowledge and possessed an active mind. She would discuss the latest literary works with Voltaire and explore how to better govern the country with Diderot. These exchanges, in the quiet of the night, allowed her to feel the clash and resonance of ideas, and in a way, temporarily escape the court's red tape and intrigues. These letters were not always light-hearted. Sometimes she would express her fatigue and helplessness in them. For instance, she might complain about the stubbornness of certain ministers or lament the difficulty of reforms. She once wrote, "Governing a country is like steering a large ship. There will always be storms, and there will always be hidden reefs." These words reveal the immense pressure she bore behind the glamorous facade of power. She could not confide these true feelings to anyone around her, because as Empress, she had to constantly maintain strength and composure. Thus, the words penned by her quill became the only outlet for her innermost thoughts. Besides letters, Catherine the Great also had a habit of keeping diaries and notes. These records were even more a true reflection of her inner world. In these private writings, she would record important events of the day, her evaluations of certain individuals, and her visions for the future. Sometimes, she would write about her hesitation regarding a political decision, her concerns about a diplomatic event, or even her attention to her own health. These writings, devoid of the rigor and embellishment found in her external correspondence, appeared more authentic and direct. She might meticulously refine the wording of a legal clause in her notes, or consider the potential impact of a tax policy. Her attention to detail and her dedication to state affairs were fully evident in these pre-sleep writings. She was not a monarch who merely issued commands. She delved into every specific aspect, striving for perfection. This meticulous attitude often kept her working late into the night by candlelight. Sometimes, she would also record amusing anecdotes from the court or observations about a certain maid or guard in her notes. These seemingly insignificant details actually reflected her insight into human nature. She knew that the court was a complex microcosm, where everyone had their own subtle intentions and everyone had their own interests. Through these observations, she could better understand the people around her, and thus better manage them. Catherine the Great's bedtime writing also reflected her thoughts on education and culture. She deeply understood that a nation's strength lay not only in its military and economy, but also in the knowledge level and civilization of its people. She would conceptualize how to establish more schools, how to introduce more Western ideas, and how to enhance Russia's cultural soft power. These grand blueprints often took shape under her quill in the quiet of the night. Her reverence for Enlightenment thought, and her respect for knowledge made her appear particularly enlightened in that era. However, even in her writing, Catherine the Great could not always find answers. Some problems were so complex, so intractable, that no matter how much she racked her brain, she couldn't find a perfect solution. In these moments, she might put down her pen, lean back in her chair, and gaze out at the dark night sky, lost in thought. Those unresolved dilemmas were like invisible specters, hovering in her mind. She also wrote some autobiographical texts, chronicling her childhood experiences, her marriage, and her ascent to the throne. These writings were imbued with her personal emotions. She would recall her childhood in Germany, and her loneliness and helplessness when she first arrived in Russia. She would also frankly confront the unhappiness in her marriage and her struggles in court intrigues. These writings allow us to see a more three-dimensional, more authentic Catherine. She was not just a majestic empress, but also a flesh-and-blood individual with emotional ups and downs. In these autobiographical writings, she would often reflect on her actions and decisions. She would ask herself if she had done well enough, if there was still room for improvement. This spirit of self-reflection allowed her to continuously learn and grow. She knew that as a ruler, one could not be content with the status quo. One had to remain vigilant and constantly strive for progress. Sometimes she would express concerns about the future in her writings. She worried whether her reforms would proceed smoothly, and whether the empire's foundation would remain stable for a long time. She deeply understood that the wheels of history rolled forward, and no one could control everything forever. This worry prevented her from fully relaxing even before sleep. She would repeatedly read what she had written, trying to find some inspiration or comfort from it. Catherine the Great's bedtime writing also demonstrated her appreciation for time. She knew that night was her own time, a time when she could think and create undisturbed. She would make full use of this time, pouring her thoughts and emotions onto the page. These writings were not just records of her personal experiences, but also a valuable legacy she left for posterity as a great monarch. She would use different inks and different handwriting to distinguish between different writing contents. Sometimes she would use red ink to mark important annotations or blue ink to record her mood. These details all reflected her seriousness and dedication to writing. She was not perfunctory but regarded each act of writing as an important ritual. In those long nights, when the entire court was asleep, only Catherine the Great's bedchamber was still lit by faint candlelight. Her figure, in the candlelight, appeared somewhat solitary, but her quill was constantly dancing, outlining the magnificent waves of her inner world. Those letters, notes, and manuscripts were like time capsules, preserving her thoughts, emotions, and wisdom in the long river of history. Through these pre-sleep writings, Catherine the Great not only recorded history but also created it. Her words influenced countless minds and changed the destiny of Russia. With her pen, she wrote the glory of an empire and the legend of an empress. And all of this happened in those quiet nights, in the candlelit bedchamber. As the whispers of midnight gradually faded, and the last candle was gently extinguished, Catherine the Great's bedchamber finally plunged into true darkness. Only outside the window, a few stars occasionally twinkled in the deep night sky, as if silently watching over the mistress of the empire. After a long and fulfilling day, and those deep pre-sleep thoughts and conversations, Catherine the Great was finally about to attempt to enter the realm of dreams. There were always certain individuals who were granted the privilege of entering her bedchamber, becoming her midnight whisperers. These people were not merely ordinary attendants. They were her most trusted advisors, her closest friends, and even important companions in her life. In the flickering glow of candlelight, these informal exchanges often touched Catherine's deepest thoughts more profoundly than the formal meetings of the day, and could also influence her future decisions more significantly. Among the most important of these were undoubtedly her confidants and advisors. These individuals might appear before her as ministers during the day, but at night, their roles would become more private. They might be summoned to her bedchamber, not for formal reports, but for a deep, unbureaucratic conversation. Catherine would seek their advice, discuss thorny political issues, or simply listen to their views on certain events. These exchanges often served as the final step, before she made her ultimate decisions on complex matters. For example, she might summon her chief advisor, Grigory Potemkin. Potemkin was not only her political partner but also an important emotional support. In the dead of night, when the court's clamor subsided, their conversations might become more candid and profound. They would discuss military strategies, diplomatic policies, and even how to better implement reforms. Potemkin's advice often provided Catherine with new perspectives, helping her to clarify her thoughts. Their relationship transcended that of monarch and subject, resembling more a tacit collaboration, a spiritual bond. These midnight whispers were often undocumented, existing only between Catherine and her confidants. This made them particularly precious and mysterious. Historians can only infer the content of these late-night conversations through indirect clues, such as fragmented entries in Catherine's diaries or information revealed in her letters to others. However, it is certain that these exchanges played a crucial role in Catherine's reign. In addition to political confidants, Catherine the Great would also engage in discussions with scholars and artists at night. Her love for knowledge and art was well known, and she enjoyed intellectual exchanges with talented individuals. These scholars might be summoned to the palace, not to teach, but to engage in discussions with the Empress on philosophy, literature, or science. Catherine would pose her questions and share her insights, enjoying these purely intellectual exchanges. For example, she might invite a renowned historian to discuss the truth of a particular historical event, or consult a philosopher for solutions to a moral dilemma. These conversations allowed her to maintain an active and open mind amidst her busy state affairs. She deeply understood that a great monarch not only needed to know how to govern a country, but also needed to possess a broad vision and profound thoughts. These midnight whispers nourished her wisdom and enriched her spiritual world. Sometimes, Catherine the Great would also have informal conversations with her family at night. Although her family life was not always harmonious and happy, she would still make time for simple conversations with her son Paul or her grandchildren. These conversations might not involve any politics, but rather revolve around daily life, their studies, and growth. In these moments, she would shed her imperial identity and return to the role of a mother or grandmother. These family whispers might bring her a sense of warmth and comfort. In a court full of intrigue and struggle, family affection might have been one of the few havens she could rely on. She would inquire about their health, ask about their recent well-being, and even offer them some advice. These seemingly ordinary conversations also reflected Catherine's desire for family and kinship as a person. Of course, in Catherine the Great's bedchamber, there were often also the figures of her personal ladies-in-waiting. They were responsible for the Empress's daily routines and her personal needs. Although their status was merely that of attendants, they were the closest to the Empress. They would observe her emotional changes and understand her preferences. Sometimes, Catherine would also have simple conversations with them, asking about their lives or listening to their anecdotes about the court. These whispers from her ladies-in-waiting, though perhaps not involving matters of state, allowed Catherine the Great to feel a touch of ordinary life. Their presence also made her nights less lonely. They were her most loyal companions and her most attentive observers. Through them, Catherine could learn about some internal dynamics of the court and the living conditions of ordinary people. During these midnight whispers, Catherine the Great would also engage in extensive contemplation. She would repeatedly ponder the information she had heard during the day, analyze various possibilities, and weigh the pros and cons. Her mind, like an endlessly running machine, continued to operate at high speed in the quiet of the night. She would imagine different scenarios and predict different outcomes, preparing herself thoroughly for the next day's decisions. Sometimes, she would toss and turn, unable to sleep due to a certain problem. She would get up, pace around the room, or return to her desk, pick up her pen, and jot down the thoughts in her mind. These reflections were often her deep considerations for the future development of the empire and her profound introspection on her personal destiny. She knew that as an empress, every decision she made could affect the lives of millions of people. This heavy sense of responsibility prevented her from fully relaxing even at night. Historians often mention that Catherine the Great possessed extraordinary insight and judgment. This might be closely related to these informal exchanges and deep reflections she engaged in at night. These midnight whispers allowed her to hear different voices and understand different perspectives, thus making more informed decisions. She was not an autocratic monarch. She was willing to listen and adept at adopting good ideas. These nocturnal exchanges also enabled Catherine the Great to better understand human nature. She would observe everyone's words and actions, analyzing their motives and intentions. She knew that the court was full of various temptations and traps, and only by seeing through people's hearts could she avoid being deceived and better control the situation. This profound understanding of human nature allowed her to remain undefeated in political struggles. In those long nights, when moonlight streamed through the window into the bedchamber, Catherine the Great might have only a few loyal attendants, or one or two close advisors by her side. But her mind was engaged in exchanges with Europe's elite and dialogues with great historical figures. These midnight whispers were not merely the transmission of sounds but also the clash of ideas and the inheritance of wisdom. She would draw inspiration from these exchanges, injecting new vitality into her reforms. She would find direction from these reflections, guiding her empire forward. These nighttime hours were so precious to her. They were her time to recharge and her time to elevate. In her own way, every night she made the final preparations for the day's imperial operations and sought a moment of tranquility for her soul. As the midnight whispers gradually faded, and the last candle was gently extinguished, Catherine the Great's bedchamber finally plunged into true darkness. Only outside the window, a few stars occasionally twinkled in the deep night sky, as if silently watching over the mistress of the empire. After a long and fulfilling day, and those deep pre-sleep thoughts and conversations, Catherine the Great was finally about to attempt to enter the realm of dreams. She would lie on the spacious bed, which might have been adorned with soft silk and velvet. However, for a monarch bearing the fate of an entire empire, even the most comfortable bed might not bring complete peace. Her body might have been exhausted, but her thoughts might still be hovering in the air, difficult to fully settle. The state affairs handled during the day, the unresolved problems, the complex interpersonal relationships, might all flash through her mind like movie scenes. Catherine the Great's sleep duration was not long, which is well known in historical records. She was accustomed to waking early to begin dealing with state affairs. Therefore, her night was more like a brief respite rather than complete relaxation. She would close her eyes, trying to make her breathing steady and relax every cell in her body. She might try to temporarily cast aside those worries and responsibilities, allowing her mind to find a moment of tranquility. However, for such a powerful monarch, to completely let go of the day's power and responsibilities, how easy could it be? Even in her dreams, the burdens of the empire, her unfulfilled ambitions, might, in another form, penetrate deep into her consciousness. She might continue to handle state affairs in her dreams, or converse with her trusted advisors. Her dreams might also be a continuation of her thoughts, a rehearsal for the future of the empire. Historians often speculate whether Catherine the Great could truly let go of everything in her sleep. Some believe that a person with such strong will and sense of responsibility, like her, might not be able to completely shake off worries about the country, even in her dreams. Her subconscious might still be constantly seeking solutions for the empire and adding bricks to her grand blueprint. Others believe that even an empress needs a moment of peace. In those brief sleeps, she might be able to temporarily forget her identity and return to the state of an ordinary person. She might dream of her childhood homeland, or those carefree times. These dreams might bring her a sense of comfort, allowing her to face the challenges of the day with renewed spirit upon waking. Catherine the Great's bedchamber was absolutely quiet at night. Any subtle sound would likely be immediately detected by the guards. This extreme quietness also provided her with the best resting environment. In this quiet, she could better listen to her inner voice and better feel her own existence. On her bedside table, there might still be a book she was reading. Even when preparing to sleep, she might still flip through a few pages. Reading, for her, was not just a way to gain knowledge but also a spiritual enjoyment. It allowed her to temporarily forget the troubles of reality and immerse herself in another world. In an era without modern technology, the quality of sleep had a crucial impact on one's mental state and decision-making ability. Catherine the Great deeply understood this, so she would try her best to create a good sleeping environment for herself. She would ensure the room temperature was suitable and the bed was comfortable. These seemingly insignificant details actually reflected her attention to her own body and mind. She might recall some interesting anecdotes that happened during the day, or some touching small details. These beautiful memories might help her relax and fall asleep more easily. She was not a cold and ruthless ruler. She also had her emotions and her warmth. When she finally fell into a deep sleep, the entire palace would be immersed in a profound tranquility. Only the loyal guards would still be silently performing their duties. Catherine the Great's dreams, like a microcosm of the entire empire, carried her hopes, her aspirations, and her infinite longing for the future. She might dream of standing on the balcony of the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, overlooking the city she had personally built. She might dream of riding a magnificent horse, galloping across the vast Russian lands, feeling the immensity and grandeur of the empire. Her dreams were filled with power and hope, and endless possibilities for the future. In those brief sleeps, Catherine the Great might be able to temporarily set aside the day's fatigue, allowing her body and mind to fully rest. Her breathing became steady and deep, and her face became softer. At this moment, she was no longer the majestic empress, but an ordinary woman, a life that needed rest and nourishment. When the first rays of morning sunlight streamed through the window into the bedchamber, Catherine the Great would wake up promptly. She would immediately get up and begin her new day. Her spirit might have had a brief recovery, but her responsibilities had never disappeared. She would once again put on her magnificent court gown, adorn herself with symbols of power, and return to the stage that belonged to her. And those midnight whispers, those pre-sleep thoughts, those brief dreams, would all become the foundation for her new day's decisions. They were like invisible nutrients, nourishing her wisdom and supporting her strength. Catherine the Great's night was not just simple rest. It was more like a secret workshop, where the future of an empire was quietly brewing. Those starlight, streaming through the window, gently fell into her bedchamber, as if carrying the blessings of the universe, accompanying this great empress into her dreams. Her breathing, soft and steady, was like an ancient lullaby, echoing in the silent palace. The clamor of the day, the tedious state affairs, the calculations of human hearts, had all gradually faded into the darkness. At this moment, there was only her, and her serene dreams, flowing slowly in this tranquility. She might, in her dream, return to her childhood estate in Germany, where the sun was always so bright, and the air was filled with the fragrance of earth and grass. Or perhaps she dreamed of her youth when she first arrived in Russia, carrying a hint of apprehension, but also infinite longing. Those past joys and tears, those struggles and perseverance, all transformed into vague yet warm images in her dreams. Her brows, occasionally furrowing gently in her sleep, were traces of the day's responsibilities left in her subconscious. But soon, they would smooth out again, as if she had found some answer or gained a moment of peace. The palace guards remained loyal outside the door, their figures appearing particularly tall in the night. But their presence, at this moment for the Empress, was a silent guardianship. The entire empire, at this moment, seemed to enter a brief pause as the Empress fell asleep. Those vast lands, those hard-working people, those surging rivers, all awaited the dawn of a new day under the starlight. And the Empress's dream, like a faint but steadfast star, twinkled in the darkness, guiding the direction of the empire.